Imagine if I told you that the United States of America is actually a third world country. What if I told you that in reality, the USA was still in development to become a civilization? It wouldn't be difficult to prove it either. Poverty, inequality, corruption, and violent discrimination are attributes associated by Western countries to developing countries. And yet, we have seen more of these attributes in the United States in recent decades. So what does it take for a Western country to be instead labeled a developing country? Hello, everybody. My name is Corrada Gelpí. I am an intercultural student of the history of colonialism. I am from the island of Puerto Rico, and the last 4 years in the United States have been a recurring culture shock. I have learned a lot about both being politically correct towards others and about the idea of a global community. Allow me to explain why I believe that the two cannot currently coincide. To begin, let's go over both concepts. The concept of political correctness is a practice done to avoid excluding, marginalizing, or insulting groups of people who are socially disadvantaged. The concept came from a humanitarian effort in which anthropologists and historians wanted to honor and respect the historically correct names for the human groups that were being studied. This concept was largely accepted as the idea of a historical empathy. And the second concept is the concept of a global community, also known as global society, international community, international society, etc. It's the idea of a world that is interdependent and connected with each other. The original creator of the concept was Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian philosopher who coined the term global village back in the 1960s. And it's important to move forward with the fact that both of these concepts are privileges to know. Not everybody in the world has access to all the information in the world like we do with the internet. And many communities don't know that we live in a world with 1,300 communities and nearly 200 countries. According to an investigation by NPR, it was found that referring to the collective underdeveloped countries and communities as the majority world was the most politically correct term. The majority world signifies that the underdeveloped countries constitute the majority of the world. Other vocabulary is based on the Western superiority complex, which depicts countries of the majority world as socially inferior. That being said, I open the topic for today's discussion. Political correctness is not accessible nor validating for the international or intercultural community, rendering it politically incorrect. What I mean by this is simple for me to understand. But for you all to understand, I'm going to have to place you all in my shoes. Imagine if the United States was a third world country. What would the news say about the United States? And now for world news. The third world country, the United States of America, has approached a grim milestone. The developing country's government has had a negative trade balance for nearly 50 years, with a debt of $30 trillion. It seems as though this isn't even their worst problem. There, in the United States of America right now, is our foreign correspondent, Billy Bob, who believes there might be more than meets the eye. Billy. Thank you very much, Jimmy Johnson. As we have seen in the news recently, the United States is in a cultural showdown with itself. One year there are massive protests against mass shootings, and then another year the protests are against gun laws. Some protests are against mass incarceration, and then another protest was in support of dictatorship. The United States is undergoing a cultural crisis where they cannot see the problem head on. Instead of protesting against mass incarceration, people protest against the police. And instead of protesting against mass shootings, people protest against gun enthusiasts. By doing this, they're socially categorized into one of the two partisan ideologies, the conservative Republican Party or the liberal Democratic Party, which both carry a large stigma. This partisan obsession leaves this third world country with a very little space for community development. The developing nation's government doesn't seem to be addressing this. They're too preoccupied with military spending and making sure their fake debt stays fake. With all this said, my thoughts and prayers go out for this culturally underdeveloped country. Back to you, Jimmy Johnson. Thank you very much. It sounds insulting, it sounds ignorant for someone who hasn't lived in your country to refer to your country as inferior. As if all the problems and crises shown about your country in the news were really that easy to solve. In the news show, Billy Bob used the term cultural crisis. Among the elements of society, culture is largely not taken into consideration when discussing world power. although they take equal part as they should when aligned with political and economic values. When Western powers refer to other countries as inferior, they're basing it off of elements of economy and politics rather than social or cultural elements. But as shown in the news show, if the world was run by cultural or social prowess rather than economic or political, the United States today would be a shithole country. The problem lies in our vocabulary. We use the term developed country as opposed to an underdeveloped country. First world is to third world, global north is to global south, civilized is to savage, the list goes on. These labels assign superiority from the get-go, leaving international or intercultural people with the idea that their country is less than others. And of course, for the USA, the greatest country in the world, this might not seem like such a problem. But for countries that base their societies on arts, history, agriculture, they might feel inferior when seeing their Western news commend other countries for military or economic interests. Societies that prioritize culture will be left behind if they don't learn to adapt to the Western ideology, which essentially means that the Western world is being culturally suppressive towards the majority world with this vocabulary. What if we found a way for every country to contribute to the global society? It wouldn't be difficult either. All we would have to do is change our vocabulary. Presenting countries with their best quality as individual societies is the first step. With this, we invite countries that have been historically ignored or dismissed to take part in the global community to contribute. We can do better to include these countries within the international narrative, rather than speaking about them ignorantly from an outside perspective. Everybody, every society or community in this world deserves a seat at the table. And they have something to bring to it too. All that the Western world has to do is give them the opportunity. So how does political correctness blend into this? There's minimal discourse about what is the correct way to refer to the majority world, yet extensive correct vocabulary for the Western world and its concepts. When looking for politically incorrect ways to refer to underdeveloped countries, 6 out of 7 terms I found were based on Western superiority and keep countries of the majority world believing they are inferior. However, you don't see terms like third world or underdeveloped being treated as if they are slur words, though they could be considered slurs under the lens of political correctness. Because of this, it only seems as though political correctness applies to Western vocabulary, not to the entire world. Political correctness should be doing more work to include the majority world, especially if it is such an internationally inaccessible concept. People within the majority world cannot adopt the idea of political correctness as it currently is because they, A, have no way of learning about it, and B, if they don't know what it is, they cannot interact with others within that politically correct society. When adding the fact that political correctness followers make no effort to include them, then it is clear that political correctness was made to discourage the international community from taking part in it. A concept originally created to better respect marginalized cultures, political correctness is slowly becoming something that works against non-Western communities specifically. The inaccessibility for intercultural people to obtain political correctness education and the aggression targeted towards intercultural people for not knowing the politically correct vocabulary are evidence that political correctness is in itself politically incorrect. In its current state, political correctness intellectually excludes non-Western countries in what I like to call the Western savior echo chamber. In this echo chamber, Western saviors validate each other's claims while invalidating the true experiences of the majority of the world. This all being said, I truly believe that political correctness is a beautiful idea. Both the concept of intersectionality and the mindset towards respecting other cultures are both very valuable and very human in nature. But as an intercultural student who has intercultural and international friends, I have seen the toll that this well-meant ideology has had on well-meaning people. I truly believe that political correctness can become a developed ideology meant for the world, not just Western or politically driven countries. But it is still too disorganized, too aggressive, and non-inclusive. There's a lot of work to do before it should be followed, let alone enforced. But with the right amendments, however, and the right thought process, political correctness in the global community can coincide and work with one another. Thank you very much, and I hope that you will ask me questions after this is over. Thank you.